Hi, Mark, and today, once again, I have to talk about the very controversial plans of the UK government on migration. The fact that Suella Braverman is still in office is obviously due to the Prime Minister's weakness, and when Rishi Sunak succeeded his chaos predecessor Liz Truss in October, he desperately needed support from his Conservative Party's nationalist right. He reappointed their figurehead Braverman to the post of Home Secretary, which she had been forced to leave just 6 days earlier for violating the government's code of conduct. Just remember that. A liberal approach to law and regulation has long characterized Braverman's career. That's not an ideal practice in a department that's supposed to uphold law and order. Brexit has catapulted a number of such politicians into the highest offices of the country. Young, ambitious, staunchly ideological, nationalist populist. The London-born lawyer of Indian African descent came to Parliament in 2015 and quickly became one of the hardline Brexit rebels. Publicly effective, she always made tight tones. Albanians are criminals and the British Empire has done a lot of good. Cultural Marxism rules on the political left. And she wants to abolish all the woke nonsense. Well, she initially made a career as a propagandist for an extremely tough exit from the EU. The then Prime Minister Boris Johnson brought her into the cabinet as Attorney General in 2020, against the protest of the Lawyers Association, who complained about a lack of experience and inaccuracies in the CV. As Johnson's term ended, the married mother of two ran live on radio for the successor, but without leaving the cabinet, as was customary. The country's highly controversial new asylum law goes back to a draft by Braverman. Deporting refugees to Rwanda without any procedure is her dream, and even her obsession, as she said in the fall. And she also wants to intern illegal immigrants in barracks and use severe deterrence to prevent an invasion of England. The law was expected to be passed, and they did it. I'll talk about this later tonight. And Suella Braverman, the hardliner from the right of the Conservatives, was there. It would give the ministers the opportunity to ignore complaints at the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. Conservative backbenchers and the Anglican Church have registered opposition there. And former Home Secretary Priti Patel traveled to Kigali last year to win Rwanda as a host country for the so-called illegal immigrants. All refugees who do not come into the country using the proper visa procedures are considered as such on the island. Last summer, a judge in Strasbourg stopped the first deportation flight with a temporary order. Lawsuits by those affected are also currently pending in British courts. After a year after signing the deal and paying £140 million to the Central African country, Britain has still not deported a single refugee to Rwanda. In the future, the deportees are to be subjected to a legal examination there and, if necessary, to be given permanent settlement rights. Returning to Great Britain would be out of the question, though. According to surveys, a majority of Britons support the project, but doubt the deterrent effect claimed by the government. The target group of the government plan are primarily young men traveling alone, who for several years have been increasingly crossing the English Channel, one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world, in inflatable boats. Several tens of thousands of people came into the country every year this way. They have to pay the organized gangs of traffickers between 3,000 and 7,000 euros per person for this. In December, the London High Court declared the deportation of those who had come to the island irregularly to be legal. Several human rights groups have objected, and this will be heard by the Court of Appeals this week when I'm filming this, and a verdict is not expected before June. In the lower house, the resistance is not only directed against the overturning of the European Convention on Human Rights, which the Strasbourg court monitors to ensure that it is observed. Experienced conservatives such as ex-Prime Minister Theresa May and former party leader Ian Duncan Smith also had serious concerns about the planned permanent detention of refugees. The responsible Home Secretary under Suella Braverman, who belongs to the extreme right wing of the Tories, has proved incapable of handling asylum procedures quickly for years, and now they are trying this. Many Afghans, Iranians, and people from East Africa, especially from war-torn Sudan, therefore wait years for their decision before they finally receive political asylum. In the House of Lords, the opposition is led by the Anglican Bishop of Durham. Paul Butler argues that Braverman's asylum policy will do harm to refugees and to society as a whole. Rwanda might have made significant progress in improving its human rights situation since the 1994 genocide, which claimed the lives of an estimated 800,000 Tutsis and moderate Hutus. However, the country still faces several human rights challenges, particularly in the areas of freedom of expression, assembly, and association, as well as in the treatment of political opponents, civil society actors, and journalists. And that's where they want to send them. The government of Rwanda is known for its strict control over the media and civil society, with many journalists and activists facing harassment, intimidation, and arrest. There have been reports of torture and extrajudicial killings, particularly of political opponents and individuals suspected of being involved in the 1994 genocide. The government has also been criticized for its treatment of refugees and asylum seekers, particularly those from neighboring countries, and for its restriction on freedom of movement and association for members of the opposition. Despite these challenges, Rwanda, yes, has indeed made progress in other areas of human rights, including gender equality, education, and healthcare. The government has also made efforts to promote economic development and reduce poverty, which has had a positive impact on the well-being of many Rwandans. But overall, the human rights situation in Rwanda remains complex and multifaceted, with both positive but more negative developments. And it is still no country I would consider as a safe haven for people seeking asylum from oppression or refugees fleeing a war. That is this country where Suella Braverman wants to send asylum seekers. That's why I included this part about Rwanda today. So you can't seriously tell anybody that this is a good place to send people. But she will. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.